Okay, I'm Ed Waldman, Waldman Sales. I provided the fuel oil equipment that feeds the 4 life safety generators for the main building. Right. The new system has 2 15,000-gallon vertical tanks, okay, that are piped to a duplex pump system that is controlled by the 4 day tanks for the emergency generators. Okay. We have solenoid valves on the supply and return from the 15,000-gallon tanks, and we have a selection button on the pump skid control panel. So you can manually select which tank to draw from. That way we ensure that the oil returns to the same tank that we're drawing from. That controller is interlocked with the tank level control system. So if you've selected tank 1 and that tank gets down to 15% capacity, it'll automatically switch to the other tank. And that set point is programmable, so at any time, if you want that changed, we can adjust that. So we supply and return to one tank, it gets down to 15%, it'll automatically switch to the other tank. Okay. The system comes over and feeds the 4 existing generators, which had previously been fed from the Enders system, and you have manual valves there so you can swap over in an emergency back to the Enders system. Same thing, you've got a return pump from that takes the overflow, if there is overflow from the day tanks. So you have a valve on that. So whatever supply system you're using, the valve and the return should be in the same position, so you return to the same system you're supplying from. Okay. We also have a polishing system that filters and separates any water out of the oil in the 15,000-gallon tanks. Again, this solenoid valve assembly that we furnished for the system. So it's programmed. Right now, we start the pumps, I think at 7:10 in the morning. It starts tank 1, runs till 10:30 on tank 1, and then at 10:40 it starts on tank 2, runs till 2 o'clock, Monday through Friday. So basically it's sized so that once a week we're turning over the whole 15,000 gallons in each tank. So again, we suck the oil out of the tank through the filter system that separates water out, filters down to 2 micron, sends it back to the same tank we pulled out of, and then it does the other tank. It's totally independent of the pump system, so it'll have no effect on running the generators. So the filter system can be operational while the generators are running. It'll have no effect because the piping and everything is completely independent. There's a fill box outside near the driveway. There's an alarm there when the tanks are 90% full. The driver gets an alarm, tells them to stop filling the tank. There's a light labeled tank 1, one's labeled tank 2. We also have mechanical overfill prevention valves on the fill lines into the tank. So there's a float that approximately 95%, if the delivery guy does overfill the tank despite the 90% alarm, at 95% the float floats up, shuts off the fill to make it basically idiot proof. I guess now we'll go down to the tank room and we'll look at and go through the actual equipment and what the service requirements are. Okay, we'll start with the tank monitor system. This has nothing to do with the pumps, it just monitors the 2 15,000-gallon oil tanks. So there's a level probe in each tank with a float on it that floats up and down with the level of the oil, sends a digital signal to this panel that the panel converts into gallons. Okay. So right now, it gives you the tank number here. So tank 2 is telling you there's 13,403 gallons. Okay. There's a tank select button. You press that, switches to tank 1, tells you there's 13,292 gallons. Since they're 15,000 gallon tanks, the high level alarm goes off at 90%, which is about 13.5. So right now we're a little below full. Okay. If the tank goes into a level alarm, the set point alarm, these SPs will light up. Okay. If you're displaying tank 1 and the light is steady, it means the alarm is on tank 1. If you're on tank 1 and the light's flashing, it means it's on tank 2. So that's how it differentiates. Okay. Okay. Right now, the light on gallons is lit up, so it's reading out in gallons. If we hit the mode button, it tells you it's diesel, and then it gives you the temperature corrected gallons. And the next light says percent gallons. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's 88.6%. Okay. Ullage tells you the difference between the number of gallons in the tank now and that 90% level that the alarm is going to go off at. So if you called for an oil delivery, they can only put 200 gallons in the tank. Okay, inches. Again, if you ever wanted to measure the level of the oil to make sure the thing's reading properly, it gives you the inches. And the last is degrees F. It gives you the temperature of the oil. And it goes back to gallons. Okay. There's also a leak sensor for each tank. These are double wall tanks. The leak sensor goes down to a chamber at the bottom. If there's a leak anywhere in the double wall in the tank, it'll drain to the bottom between the double walls, and that sensor will alarm in that panel, and that panel goes to your automation. There's also an auxiliary contact in there that's wired to the automation system. That's basically it for the tank monitor system. Now we'll go to the pump system. Right now the system is off. If it was powered, we have handoff automatic switches for each pump. They should always be left in the auto position. Okay. We have
inside if you want, right?
Excuse me?
Inside it won't just return.
Yeah, but if, okay, you want me to turn it on?
It's up to you if you want.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we can turn the power on. Okay. When you turn the power on, it defaults to tank 1. You see the light is lit up. That means the solenoid valves for tank 1 are open. Solenoid valves for tank 2 are closed. Okay. We also have a light for low level alarm. So that tank monitor system, again, when it gets to 15%, sends a low level alarm here. This will light up. It'll automatically switch to the other tank. Okay. If you want to manually switch to the other tank, you hit the select button, press that, switches to the other tank. The solenoid valves change positions. Okay. We have a switch here that says P1 Alt P2, normally set in the Alt position. That allows the pumps, excuse me, to alternate. Every time it finishes filling up the day tanks, it'll switch to the other pump on the next start signal. Okay. The only reason you'd want to change that is if one pump is out for service. We have isolation valves on the supply and return to each pump, so we can individually isolate one pump. So if you had a problem with pump 2, you could close the isolation valves, remove it for service. You'd put the alt switch to P1, so P1 would be called first every time. Okay. In the common discharge of the two pumps, we have a flow switch. When the system gets a signal from the day tank to start the pump, we start a time delay relay, gives you 40, 50 seconds to get the flow established. After that timer times out, if the flow switch does not sense flow, it automatically brings on the second pump and rings a pump fail alarm. So if you get a pump fail alarm, it could mean that the pump actually failed. Could mean you got a bad flow switch, the flow switch didn't make, or it could mean that the solenoid valve at the day tank didn't open. Since we feed 4 day tanks with 1 pump, there are solenoid valves at the inlet of the day tank. Okay. So we only feed the day tank that's calling. But if that solenoid valve fails to open, the pump will be deadheaded, the oil will go out the relief valves, and you'll get the pump fail alarm. So the first thing I would do is I get a pump fail alarm, I would come out, we can close the discharge valve on the pump. Okay, and then we can bump the pump in hand, see that the pump works. Okay. And this pressure gauge is in the discharge of the pump, so you can see if the pump's putting out pressure. Okay. These pumps are specified at 50 pounds. So you normally set the relief valves about 20 pounds above the design pressure. So actually it looks like they put out about 75 pounds when they're deadheaded. So we also have a drip rim around the whole pump skid. There's a lot of threaded joints there. If there's a leak, there's a float switch there that will alarm. I don't want to trip that right now because I think it goes to your automation system. Right. Okay. The only routine maintenance item on the whole system is you have a duplex strainer here. You know, the strainer basket should be checked periodically. When the lever is in this position, it means we're drawing out of this side. You're free to open this. Okay, if the lever's in the middle, both baskets are open. You don't want to do that, as we learned previously, because you get about 20 feet of pressure coming down, you're going to get oil popping out. But if it's over on one side, you can open this, pull the basket out, and inspect it. Again, we have isolation valves in the suction and discharge of each pump. There's a check valve in the discharge of each pump. We also have a differential pressure gauge. Again, that'll give you an alarm if the strainer does get plugged up. We sense the pressure drop across the strainer. Again, you know, these are the relief valves. These are piped into the return back to the tank. So if the pump is deadheaded, the oil does circulate back to the tank. Any questions on the pumping system?
The tanks do not switch automatically though?
They will if you get down to 15%, but they don't alternate or anything.
So we're going to be switching back and forth every generator test.
Yeah. Again, you can check the level in each tank, and one's lower than the other, you can switch to that tank. Right. You also have runtime meters for the individual pumps. Again, the pump should alternate, it should even out over time. Okay. And we want to keep the power off for now. Okay. All right. Next, we'll get into the fuel polishing system. This is a fuel polishing system. There's a separate supply and return to each tank. It's totally independent of the pump system that feeds the generators. Okay. On the inlet, you can see the solenoid valves on the supplies and returns. They're wired to this junction box. Okay. The control panel, again, is programmed. It'll run on tank 1 for like 3 hours and 20 minutes. And then it'll run on tank 2 for 3 hours and 20 minutes. Okay. The oil comes through, we have a sight glass, so you can actually see the oil flowing. Then the oil splits, there's two sets of coarse strainers and bulk water separators on the section of the pump. There are float switches that go down to the bottom. If these start to fill up with oil, as you know, oil is lighter than water. Oil will float on top of the water. You'll get a water alarm. Okay, when the water gets too high in the strainer. So the system will shut down. Okay, there are there's a drain on each of these baskets. So you open them one at a time, then you get a kind of a hand valve to throttle it. There's a plastic tube, so you drain the water out till you see oil start to come out, and then close it. Okay. We also have a vacuum alarm. If the strainer gets plugged for some reason, and the vacuum goes too high, there'll be an alarm. It'll shut the pump down and give you an alarm. And the screen will display high vacuum. So, same thing if you get a water alarm, it'll display high water. Okay. This is the pump. Then you've got two sets of final filters. The first bank are 10 micron. The second bank of filters are 2 micron. They also remove water. They get down to 99% water removal. Okay. Then it just circulates back to the tanks. And again, we have a pressure alarm on the discharge side. If those get plugged up, you'll get a high pressure alarm and it will shut down. We also have an emergency stop button. Okay.
Anytime those happen, we're going to get this here too.
Yeah, you'll get an alarm there. There's also a common alarm here that goes to the automation system. So you'll get, polishing system alarm. I don't know what your alarm. Then you come down here and you'll be able to see on the screen. Okay. There's also a disconnect on the wall. There's instructions here on how to program the start-stop times, but if you ever want to change it, just give me a call. I'll come down and do it. Any questions?
Is there a need for us to have one of those barrels where it's filled out here?
Where's it right there?
Okay.
Well, safety's getting
Just like the pump skid, everything in here is contained. There is a leak sensor at the bottom. That's the other alarm I forgot to mention. And it will display
It's
leaks.
sealed?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's sealed as a door when you open this door, right?
Yeah. But this, there's a right.
It isn't much of a seal. It looks like
Right.
2 inches.
But you're not going to have a catastrophic leak.
Understood.
Right.
I mean, are you going to have something that indicates that there's some type of leak and it will shut the solenoid?
Yes. Okay. Well, if there's a leak, it will shut the system down.
Okay.
Okay.
That'll be a safety circuit thing. We'll say there's a leak.
Right.
It'll shut it off. It'll shut this down. That'll be the end of it.
Right.
Okay. Is that going to be indicated on the examples of that happening?
Right. It'll just say common alarm for polishing system or whatever. Then you'll come down. You'll see what it is.
What it is. Okay.
Yeah. It's basically identical to the system in the Enders system. The only difference is it's got the the solenoid valves.
Oh, no,
for the
that's
two-
good. That
for the
should be
two-
a priority.
So these gauges give you the actual, the vacuum right now it's running next to nothing because the oil level's above the pump. That's why it doesn't. But you can see this gives you like the set point. So it's set at about 15 inches of vacuum.
Yep.
And on the discharge, again, it's running It's very low pressure. Those filters are pretty clean.
Yep.
And it's set at about 50 pounds. Is the maximum discharge pressure.
What's the maintenance routine for something like this? Do you come in once a year or one?
Well, you contract Hayes. I believe Hayes Pump is going to issue a quote to pick it. They also do the Enders one. They
Okay.
come out, I think, every 3 months and change the filters.
Okay.